All right, guys, we're changing the passenger axle shaft assembly on this 2018 Ram 1500 with an EcoDiesel. This is for any of the classic style, not new style Rams. So start by taking off the wheel, 22 millimeter wheel nuts, and then we'll get into pulling some brakes. All right, so we want to take our brake caliper off and hang it up. So we got 13 millimeter bolts. We're going to take those out. You may need a flathead screwdriver or something to retract the brake calipers a little bit, just because there are little nubs on the brake pad and the caliper gets hung up on those. Or if you want, you could just leave this all together and remove the 21 millimeter bolts that hold the bracket assembly all in one, which is what I'm going to do. Before you do that, just make sure that you disconnect your ABS harness here. So we got a just a little thing there. Make sure that that is secured. We don't want that falling. That's a lot of weight. Probably rip the brake line off. And we'll take this rotor assembly off now. We're going to take this axle nut off. It's a 36 millimeter. If you have rust on the ends of your splines, I'd clean them up, put some lube on them. And then just make sure that your axle is free. Sometimes they get stuck. Don't use a hammer and hit the ends of this, or you'll mushroom it and have a hard time getting the nut back on. I mean, I guess you're changing the axle shaft anyway, so it's not a big deal, but. All right, grab yourself a 21 millimeter. We're gonna go ahead and take the tie rod end, outer tie rod end nut. Take it off. And we're also going to take this upper ball joint nut off. But before we do this, we need more slack in this. So we're going to disconnect it quick here. There's just a little Christmas tree behind this fender liner. Just pop that off. And you'll find a red locking tab here. So you may need a screwdriver, and some silicone spray will probably help you. So I'm going to grab that. Those things can be a real stubborn pain to get off. Okay, now we've got that. There's just one more clip up in here. So we undo that. Now our harness is free. And go ahead and take that upper ball joint nut off now. I'm putting a flex on with the 21 to be able to sneak in here. And now there is a tool that you should have to use to separate this ball joint, but I'm just gonna use a hammer. Use it at your own risk. I don't recommend using a hammer, but that's just how I do it. I'm gonna hit it here. I'm also gonna hit it here. And I set the tie rod end up there like that, so it's out of the road. Now we can get this out. Now this will come out, but it needs to be in a certain orientation. I just have to take that harness off. Sorry if that's in the camera. So yeah, this axle does come out of there. You don't need to remove that ball joint at all. Just to clarify, just have patience, it will come out. Now we need to lift the vehicle up, get underneath. That shaft just literally clips onto a separate shaft in between. So we take a look here, we get this thing out of the bag. You can see it's just splined, and on the end of the shaft that goes in, there's just a ring that snaps into that groove in there. So we just need to beat on the axle and get it to come out. Okay, so I'm gonna just try to hammer right on here and try to get this thing. Do not hit this case, it's aluminum. I've seen them fractured before, so be careful. And these things do like to get seized on, so just have patience and work away at it. Using a pry bar too. Old trusty air hammer wins again. There you go. Now we just got to clean up those splines a little bit and we'll start installing. Okay, so I've taken a wire wheel on a drill and I cleaned up these splines really well. The key is to just have them super clean so that this thing snaps in. You don't want a rusty shaft. You'd be trying to fight it and not fun. So I'm gonna take this nut off. I'm gonna slip it through there. And you've noticed I did spray some rust protectant slash, not really penetrating fluid, but more of oil to help protect that shaft. Now, this shaft is not master splined. So what I might do is just grab a mallet and I'm just gonna drive that thing in. So. Sorry, I actually use a dead blow, but as long as it's soft, like I say, we don't want to damage those threads or we'll be having a bad day. Okay, so now we need to get this axle in. This is the part that we need to have some patience with. There is a certain spot that you can slip this in. I can't exactly remember which direction it goes, but I know that you can get it in there. I think the knuckle needs to be that way. And then it goes in here. Yep. Just like that. Now we can just make sure our wiring harness is tucked out of the way. It's not going to get crushed or pinched by anything. Set the axle back in. Just make sure we get it started there. I'm going to put the nut on there just so it doesn't pop back through. I'm going to start that ball joint nut. Now these nuts have like a nylon insert in them, so they're supposed to be replaced every time, but I reuse them sometimes. So. They're both the same for ball joint and tie rod end, so don't worry about mixing them up. And go ahead and snug those down with the impact gun. Not too tight because we want to torque it, right? Sure. All right, so I've listed out the torque specs here. This is actually from another video I made, but same truck, same stuff. Forget about the bearing bolts, you're not doing that. 36 mil axle nut, you're doing 184 foot-pounds. Upper ball joint nuts, 26 foot-pounds plus 180 degrees. So this one includes some degrees. The tie rod end, 22 foot-pounds plus a 90-degree turn. Our wheel nuts are 130. Our caliper adapter bolts, that's the big bolts, 130 foot-pounds. And then if you took the caliper off, those 13 mil bolts are 24 foot-pounds. Bottomed out. Just make sure when you're doing that, this harness isn't stuck in behind there because we don't want to cut it in half. I am going to just go ahead and torque these two right now, and then I'm going to clean the face of this. Because we've taken it off, you can see there's a bit of rust in there. And what can happen is you go ahead and put this back on, it's not exactly in the right spot, or a bunch of this rust gets in there. It's now going to sit on there crooked, and when you go to slow down, what are you going to get? Brake pulsation. So make sure you clean the inside of the rotor, clean the outside of the rotor, that face of that wheel bearing, also the back of the rim, if there's any corrosion on there. And yep, we're going to put the brakes on after I get this stuff torqued. I'm just going to loosen this off a little bit. Now I'm going to torque it to 26. Okay, and then our tie rod end, we want 22. Same thing, I'm going to loosen this off. And just tighten it down. Okay, now I'm going to set up my degrees. I'm going to do the upper ball joint first at 180 degrees. So we'll do angle, 1 to 0. I'll just set that there. Yeah, it's just not gonna do it. Why it just calibrates, I guess. Yeah. 180. Okay, and then we want to do our ball joint, or our tie rod end at 90. So There we go. So that's torqued up there. I'm gonna go ahead and clean this stuff up. Okay, so I've cleaned the hub, put this on. I'm just gonna turn this a little bit. I'm gonna stick my ABS harness over here for a second. Now, I just cleaned off that little bit of a rust ridge that was around there so that the brakes will slide on. Grab my bolts here. Go ahead, take this hook out. Get those bolts started. We can run this. Just make sure too that your caliper isn't like flipped over. Make sure that line is correct. Stick that in there. And then I just take a bit of silicone spray and I spray it in the end of this connector. Not gonna hurt nothing. It's just gonna help everything slide together properly. Just like that. Stick that back up in there. Okay, I'm gonna tighten down those bolts. 21 mil, and they get torqued down to 130 foot-pounds. So we'll get these snug down at least. I'll grab torque wrench and get these tightened down. Actually 132. Perfect. Okay, so we're just going to okay, axle nuts torqued. I guess just probably, if you want, you can put some anti-seize in around this edge on the inside so your wheel doesn't get stuck on. Brakes are torqued, this is torqued, that's torqued. We just check it over, make sure everything's cool. Looks good to me, I'm happy. Go ahead and get this wheel put on. Torque these wheels down to 130 foot-pounds. Kick it out of here. I'm glad it didn't seize up. All right, last, we just got to torque these wheels on. I forgot to mention that it would be a good time before you put the brakes on and get all to that point, if you had a lot of grease from the axle, to wash all that stuff off. That would be the time to do it. Perfect. You're all set. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. Got any comments, throw them down in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to subscribe.